Thank you, everyone. Hello, I'm Sharon Tapper. I'm with the Executive Director of the Music Managers Forum US. Great to see so many of you here. If you are new to the MMF-US, welcome back. If you've attended or participated in our events or activities before, welcome back and welcome to you all. We're really grateful for you to be here. If you are less familiar with who we are, let me tell you, we were established in 1993. The MMF-US is the leading trade association for artist managers and self-managed artists in the United States. We endeavor to serve the needs of our community in numerous ways, but the core of what we offer is education, networking, and advocacy. Through educational webinars like today's, we're able to support managers and artists by providing continuous professional development within an ever-evolving music industry. We provide networking opportunities both virtually in the form of webinars like today's and in-person events through our community meetups and all-day summits. It's here that our community learns, shares, and connects with one another. Through our advocacy efforts, we are able to provide a collective voice to lobby and affect policy change for a fairer and more transparent music industry. We are a registered 501c6 non-for-profit organization that relies on the support of members and the generosity of our sponsors to provide our programming. If you aren't already a member of the MMF-US, please consider joining. And you can do that on our website and just going to mmfus.com and clicking the join button. If you want to stay informed of our events, simply sign up for our newsletter at mmfus.com. You can also follow us on our social media channels. Hashtag MMF-US and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once edited, that is where this webinar will appear for you to rewatch at your leisure. The MMF-US is also part of a larger global network called the IMMF, which is the International Music Managers Forum. They represent 65 music manager forums around the world. That includes Europe, Latin America, Asia, Australia, and Africa. It's the IMMF that enables us to connect with artist managers globally across various business opportunities. So, the reason why we are here, please join me in welcoming Charta's founder, Zach Bolander, and Charta user and independent artist, Tate Tucker, who are here today to talk about how Charta can streamline contracts and agreements from what can take many months to generate to just a few minutes. Zach, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet everyone here today. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to speak with you. The title of this webinar is Contracts in Minutes, Not Months. And just to run you quickly through the agenda, I'm going to make an introduction of myself. I'm going to go through a refresher on the importance of music clearances, introduce Tate Tucker, who is a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for a very long time. We've worked together as manager artist, as lawyer artist. We go way, way back. And then as we get through the sort of common pain points that managers and artists experience as they try to clear their music, we'll tee up the Charta demo and go through our process and show you how we can save you a lot of time and a lot of money on those clearance agreements. So a little background about me. I graduated law school in 2012. I actually started out in corporate law in San Francisco. I did a lot of mergers and acquisitions for telecoms companies, serial acquirers like Google, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and a lot of securities work, IPOs, et cetera. It was really jarring to move from law school, which was incredibly stimulating, dynamic, into law practice, where it seemed like every day was the same. I was doing the same agreements over and over and over again. I looked at my future 20, 30 years down the line, and I didn't really like what I saw. I thought that I'd just be doing the same thing forever. And so at that time, I was looking for a new opportunity. I had a really good friend of mine, not Tate, who asked me to be his manager. He realized I was looking for a new challenge. He had a tour set up through India, Southeast Asia, and Australia. And he said, hey, if you're looking for a new challenge, why don't you come travel the world with me, be my manager, it'll be a blast. So I agreed, I subleased my apartment, I quit my job. And then a week before we were supposed to get on the plane, he backed out on paying me. He thought I would go anyway, I didn't. But I was so committed to the idea of being a music manager, of working in the music industry. I was so enraptured by it that I decided to move to Los Angeles by myself and just figure it out as I went. And so I moved down to Los Angeles in March of 2015. I met Tate a couple months later, but during the meantime, I was working as a lawyer for a couple indie artists, indie record labels, et cetera. Ended up getting a job at United Talent Agency, worked in the music touring department for Chris Kajewski, who's a great guy, great mentor. I learned the music touring business inside and out while I worked there. And then after working there for a year and a half, I transitioned to King Holmes, Paterno, and Soriano, which is an entertainment law boutique based in Beverly Hills that represents Metallica, Frank Ocean, Skrillex, Calvin Harris. They have just an incredible client roster. And what I was able to do, besides signing Tate as one of my first clients to King Holmes, was I was able to work as a corporate lawyer for our bigger acts, helping out Metallica, for example, start their whiskey company, Blacken, build that from the ground up with them. And then also worked on the entertainment side of things and started upskilling on that sort of talent work, where I was clearing music for Skrillex, Zed, Steve Aoki, doing producer deals, mixer deals, helping to do record deals. I did Tate's record deal, his publishing deal, and really educating myself and upskilling myself so I could do all the talent work that our clients needed too. So that was a really, really great experience. But as I progressed at King Holmes, where I worked for roughly 6 years, the backlog of clearance agreements started to stack up. It started to get crazy. I worked on Steve Aoki's double album, Neon Future 4, where we had 24 tracks to clear. It was roughly 100 clearance agreements, and it was an incredibly painful and repetitive process. And the worst part about it wasn't just repetitive, but it was also very, very time consuming and very expensive. It was taking anywhere from 5 to 7 months to get a producer deal done. It was costing our clients $4,000 or $5,000. And it just seemed like these very simple contracts were preventing me from getting to the higher value work that my clients wanted me to do, whether it was a record deal or a publishing deal. And so that's when I had the idea for Charta, which was essentially, how could I help my clients get these contracts done as quickly as possible? And that's when the platform was born. We decided to create a solution where 2 users can fill out a questionnaire each, create their initial offers, compare their answers, negotiate the answers they don't agree on just yet. Once they have one set of answers they both agree to, we could then use a database of contract provisions to assemble a custom law firm quality contract that both users could sign. So with that, which we'll get to the demo, I would like to go ahead and just do a quick refresh on the copyright laws behind music. It's the source of all of the Byzantine administration in our industry, but let me try to do my best just to give you a brief overview. So there are 2 copyrights in every song that you listen to. There's the master sound recording, which is the actual audio file of the composition, which is the written music, whether that's lyrics or notes being performed. So master, audio file, composition, the idea or the written version of the song. So labels and distributors, they distribute copies of the master. Publishers, they go ahead and collect the money that's owed to the co-writers of composition. So the reason why clearance agreements are so important is because the default rule under the Copyright Act is that everyone that touches a copyrightable work, whether it's a master sound recording or a composition, is a joint and equal co-owner. And what that means is if Tate and I sat down together in the studio and we worked on a track, Tate was the artist, I was the producer, and we created this audio file. We're like, this is it, this is final, this is great. And we decided to move forward with releasing it. At that moment, Tate and I are equal owners, and we have equal rights to use that song. So Tate might tell me, hey, I'm gonna put $10,000 behind this song, release it in 6 weeks, really build some momentum. There's nothing stopping me from the next day releasing that song under my own artist name on Spotify, potentially even retitling that song. And so what that highlights is there needs to be one person or one rights holder who has the ability to monetize a master sound recording. And in order to do that, what Tate has to do is he has to come to me as his producer and get me to assign my rights and the copyright to Tate, so that he ends up owning 100% of the copyright in that master sound recording, and therefore he becomes the exclusive decision maker, the exclusive point of monetization for that master sound recording. So it's the plumbing of the music industry. It's tedious work, but it's incredibly necessary work. You don't want to release a song and then have someone come out of the woodwork and say, hey, I put some keys down on that song and the artist has cleared everyone else. Well, that means that the person that played a couple keys on your song, they actually own 50% of that song with you and they have all the same rights that you do. And there are plenty of horror stories of that happening in the music industry, which we won't get into, but this is the backdrop against which clearance agreements become so important. And the reason why the federal government decided to make the default rule that everyone is a joint and equal co-owner is because they didn't want people to go to the court and have arguments over, well, I wrote the top line, so I should get more, or, you know, I did vocals, so I should get the majority of the ownership of the master sound recording. The court is like, look, everyone's equal. If you don't agree with that, you figure it out yourselves by using these clearance agreements to figure out those rights and reallocate them. So when it comes to contributors on a master who need to get cleared, you're going to have your musicians. So the primary artist needs to end up owning 100% of the rights, whether they're self-distributed or passing along those rights to a label. And then featured artists, you're going to have to get cleared, producers and engineers, whether they work on tracking vocals or instruments, or if they're mixing down and mastering your song. So this is the universe of collaborators that work in a master sound recording. Now, one of the wrinkles under the Copyright Act is that in order for a clearance agreement, which is an agreement between a musician and one of their contributors, or a primary artist and one of their contributors, whether it's a producer, mixer, you name it, is that the agreement must be in writing and signed by both parties in order to be effective. So if you work out a deal over text with your producer and you say, hey, let's go 50-50 or let's go 75-25 on the profits from this master, and the person responds and says, sounds good, that's not effective under the US Copyright Act. It has to be in writing and signed by both parties. And just to quickly run through what the clearance agreements are for a master, you've got your collaborator agreement. This is for the so-called, full X or and credit. So it would be Tate and Zach, song name, a side artist agreement. So this would be for a featured artist where it'd be Tate, song name featuring Zach. You have your producer agreement, your mixer agreement, your mastering agreement, which is a little bit atypical. Typically, your mixer and will also master your agreement. But if you don't have that type of arrangement, you can go ahead and just do a mastering agreement. And then finally, you have your work for hire agreement. This is for contributors that typically aren't credited, that work on a flat fee basis, whether they're session musicians, backing vocalists, or producers that just track vocals. Now, I'm sure what you guys are thinking is, why aren't there agreements for composition clearances? So the reason for that is you don't necessarily need one person or one rights holder to own 100% of the musical composition. And the reason for that is the publishing industry has created a blanket licensing regime, whether it's through blanket licenses with consumers or through statutory licenses like mechanicals, where they can very effectively passively collect income. They don't need to actually actively promote a composition. They can just make sure that at the point of sale, they're being paid their cut for copies of master sound recordings being sold. And there's a very strong tradition within the industry of publishers working together and having aligned interests when it comes to doing things like sync deals. So they'll all work together, try to get the biggest fee possible for a sync, and then they'll usually sign off all at once. So there isn't as much of a holdup or as much interference when it comes to working with composition rights holders. And agreeing on ownership percentages over email has been upheld and is effective under the Copyright Act. So some of the statutory and blanket licensing regimes, relate to physical mechanical royalties. So record labels and other master sound recording owners, whenever they make a physical copy of a record, they have to pay statutory royalty that's fixed under the US Copyright Act. They usually pay it to Harry Fox Agency or another large mechanical collection agency. A new development in our industry is that for digital mechanical royalties, a new entity called the Mechanical Licensing Collective now collects those mechanicals every time a copy of a master sound recording is consumed digitally. And then finally, you have your PROs, your ASCAPs, BMI, CSACs, where they collect public performance royalties from end users like radio stations, nightclubs, et cetera. And again, in each of these instances, the rights holders of the composition are passively collecting their income. So getting into how clearance agreements have been handled traditionally. So I actually hopped in on this when I was working with Tate when I moved to Los Angeles. It was August of 2015, and we had started working together. And one of the first things Tate did when we started working together, he knew I was a lawyer, obviously, was he started passing along these clearance agreements to me. And it kind of blew my mind that before then, Tate was trying to handle these agreements by himself. These are typically templates that people download off the internet. They just fill in their name, they send it over to the other party, they hope it works. They go to a musiccontracts.com or musiclawcontracts.com, they select producer agreement, they download it, they hope it works. It's a one-size-fits-all contract. They really don't know what's in it. They just know they need that paperwork in order to protect their rights. So that's one way that independent musicians handle these agreements. Another way that independent musicians handle these agreements is that they use handshake deals, or what we call handshake deals, which is going back and forth over text or email, agreeing in principle to deal terms, but not actually signing a written agreement. As mentioned earlier, that's going to be a big problem because under the Copyright Act, in order for that to be effective, the agreement has to be in writing and signed by both parties. So the next level up from independent musicians, you're going to have your developing artists and managers. So they typically also use DIY templates and handshake deals. Whenever you have a management company, in my experience, that has a lot of prestigious clients, those bigger clients typically have very big entertainment lawyers attached, and those managers can usually get that entertainment law firm or entertainment lawyer to take on some of their developing acts. However, when that happens, those entertainment lawyers usually take on the developing artists on a commission basis. And the entertainment lawyer typically will help the developing artists get a record deal, a publishing deal, some big ticket deals done with big advances, maybe even some legal advances specifically for their fees. And that's a great payday for the artist. It's a small payday for the lawyer. And then from that point forward, the lawyer starts to look at the clearance agreements they have to get done for these developing artists as a loss leader, because they're eating into their own fee. They can't charge this developing artist an hourly rate in order to do these clearance agreements. So let's say an artist signs a record deal, they get a $100,000 advance and they get a $15,000 legal advance. So under that record deal on the first contract term, the artist has to release 12 songs. So on average, I would say each song has about 3 to 5 clearance agreements it needs to get done. So the lawyer starts off with $15,000, and now they're expected to do anywhere from 36 to 60 clearance agreements. And each of those agreements is going to take anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. So on the low end, you're looking at roughly 216 hours of legal work for $15,000. So very, very typically, entertainment lawyers aren't going to prioritize that work, or they'll hand it off to paralegals. Either way, it won't be at the top of the stack, and it's going to take a long time to get those clearance agreements done. And paradoxically, developing artists have the greatest need to release content as quickly as possible. And so you have a mismatch of artists needing to get content out quickly, and lawyers who aren't very responsive. Now, finally, you have your so-called professional or artists and managers, the very top of the pyramid. So they have entertainment lawyers that are more responsive, but even so, and I can say this confidently from experience, even working with the biggest artists in the world, the biggest managers in the world, getting clearance agreements done takes months. It just does. Whether you're the bottleneck or the other side is a bottleneck, these agreements aren't prioritized. They're considered repetitive, low value, and they're not prioritized. So even when you're at the top of the pyramid, you're trying to get this stuff done, it's going to take you months. It's going to cost you, now that you've transitioned away from that commission deal, it's going to cost you a lot of money on a per hour basis. So now you're paying anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to get a producer agreement done. It's taking 5, 6, 7 months. I'm sure some of you in this webinar have stories where you've gone ahead and released the song without the clearance agreement being done, without a producer agreement in place. We spoke with a day-to-day manager of a very, very massive artist, a stadium artist, who told me that he is still waiting on a signed producer agreement from 2012. So there's that for sure. And so with all that background, what I'd like to do now is move away from my perspective as a lawyer, as an indie manager, and hand the floor over to Tate so he can give you his perspective as an independent artist, and then subsequently as a label artist with Harvest Records, where we've got his first record deal signed. Have him give you his perspective on those experiences. So I'm going to stop there and hand over the mic to Tate.
Hello. Thank you, Zach. That was an incredible intro. Do you want me to give a little experience with the platform first?
Yeah, I would love for you just to talk about your experience as an artist.
Yeah.
How about we start with this? How about we start with the moment where we realized paperwork is important? I think that's a really important moment in the progression of an artist's career, where they're like, hey, I'm not just making music for my friends anymore. This is like a serious commercial activity that requires some paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because it's never the moment you think it's going to be. There were probably like 30 moments where I thought it was the end of the world, that I was running over to you to try to get things finished, and no one ever ended up hearing those things. But I think it was 2016, and it was Working with Friends, and it was kind of a throwaway track that I had made with a friend of mine. His dad is fairly prominent in the industry, but he didn't take it as seriously. And it's pretty early in my career, and so we put it together as sort of this is a ramp into the real rollout we're doing. You know, the other project was where we were getting interest and offers, and this was kind of some goofy stuff we made in 10 minutes. So that song actually took off with a lot of traction. And there was also another producer that I wasn't like fully conscious of. He wasn't in the process. He wasn't there. He had helped to make this beat before we were in the session. So there was like a little opaqueness going into the release, but there was also no expectation. And so that song took off crazily. It got devoured by the Spotify algorithm. I had done a lot of PR work that had kind of ramped into Discover Weekly. And all of a sudden, like, it was very quickly becoming like as comparable as my tutoring job checks. And nobody had automatic splits, especially not my distro. So all of a sudden, like, I'm seeing this money, I'm reinvesting everything from my PayPal into my career and my videos. But something in my head is like, you know, this is important to figure out if you are supposed to be dispersing these things. Like, let's look at these splits. And I remember being like 6 or 7 months into investing a few grand a month when I realized I had been like not dispersing parts of this agreement, and then that we had some disputes over, you know, what these splits looked like. And I just remember getting hit up by like one of my really good friends' lawyers. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, oh. So that was the moment where it went from the threshold of you know, casual to this is serious. This is money I don't necessarily have. I don't have a professional to tap. You know, doing my groundwork and my due diligence beforehand would have saved me a lot of headaches. And we resolved it, you know, privately and figured it out. And luckily it kept monetizing, so I was able to just, you know, back pay some of those months. But that was definitely the moment I realized housekeeping is super important. You almost don't want anything to take off until you have your everything in a row. I've had it happen one time before with a big viral trend, and by the time we had like 20 million views on this original song over a non-original beat, they didn't want anything to do with us. So they just kept everything, kept the free promo, and it was a terrible experience as well. So overall, those were a couple of the early ones. You know, luckily we got all of this stuff figured out with the other song before it was synced into Empire and some other things, but stressful.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So I know it's when you're an independent musician, you're working with other indies, it's usually this very organic experience. And not to lead you too much, but I guess what I want to ask you about is what would, you know, there's a lot of friction when you don't know when you're getting paid. So
Right.
do you think that looking back, like having more clarity between all the parties around when are you going to get paid, you know, what are you standing behind in terms of recoupable costs? Do you think having that conversation early on in the process would have helped alleviate some of that frustration later?
100%. Just like, I mean, this is skipping to kind of why I've really enjoyed the experience on this platform, but, you know, there's as much of a didactic element as there is, you know, like a professional and utility approach. So I feel like that's kind of what happens when you address these things, you know, before the release of a project as well. As there's an education. And with that, especially artist to artist or indie to indie, that begets trust. And there's a certain ethos that's established when you're not going through these indirect professional suits, charging you a retainer or an hourly and kind of intimidating people and not educating in the process, you know? So
I think you got hit. I think you got hit in this situation with the classic, the text and the Venmo request. I've had a lot of friends who are indie musicians, who are indie artists rather, have released songs, have that happen to them from their producer. Even though you haven't seen the money yet. So
and that's the thing. It's like, you know, understanding the accounting of you know, the 3-month delay, understanding just it's just so much you learn as one part of this machine, you know, and certain producers and certain creatives don't ever care to expand that knowledge. So it is sort of this delicate balance of, you know, I even have a screenshot here of going through this process for clearing this project. And I had to send you all these skeptical texts from someone I've never screwed over and have you run just $1,000 and how that would look into these current splits in the agreement that we had. And so it didn't, the idea of the percentage not being a majority or not being what he felt as a producer should be 50-50 or as if we were in a band. When he saw how the accounting actually worked, he was so happy with his cut. And I think sometimes there's strong personalities on TikTok and Twitter that tell you, especially producer Twitter, producer TikTok, that creates this divisive vibe between artists and artists, producers and producers, labels and producers. And all of that can be very eliminated by just understanding when you're paid, how you're paid, who should be paid what, and the role of an artist that also serves as a label. And there's a value in a lot of these things and these conversations that I just wasn't able to have in the traditional independent lane, and also in the being with the label, especially. But yeah.
I think that's a great segue. So we were working together when you were in India. I was trying to help you as much as I could. And then once we transitioned to signing you to a label, you got put into the machine. Record labels won't release tracks unless they know they have all the clearance agreements signed copies in their hands. So with that very sort of rigorous procedure in place, what was that like for you in terms of acclimating to it? Like, what pitfalls did you see? What pain points did you experience?
I think in general, like, I think I can just say, like, this statement alone, like, most of my contracted period as an artist under that label was spent handling admin, and maybe 9 months of that 4 years was a rollout, and that was 6 songs. And those 6 songs were cooked up in that first 6 to 8 months of that 4 years. So in terms of efficiency and in terms of like momentum that I had built, with a much smaller sum of money and just consistency, that died, and it wasn't supplanted by this, ubiquitous arrival. Yeah, man. I don't know. I think it was overall the idea that before I could make something, it was relevant, it was sticky, and it was out in a month. That was the only reason I was able to grow. And losing that growth model eliminated who I was inherently as an artist, who was not just an artist, but was tied to his analytics, was tied to his accounting, was part of my leverage was the transparency of being able to give any single person involved, a cut of something that I felt fair. And so losing all of that pie and losing an understanding of where I even stood in it, it took me about 2 years and some deep conversations with Zach to understand my best case scenarios. And if I couldn't even get music out, if I couldn't even fit this new formula, this new algorithm, like if I can't feed it consistently, there's no way I was even going to get to a somewhat optimal state of, livable wages from that. So
Yeah.
It was a big transition, but it was mostly just so much muck and mire and lack of trust from my collaborators. And the further we went in that process, the further I felt deepened from the music we made and the people that I was making it with. And it definitely severed a few relationships, So
Yeah. So would you mind if I share how long on average those contracts those clearance agreements took to get done?
Although it'll be triggering.
It took on average 210 days. So 7 months to the day almost to get a producer agreement done, a mixer agreement done, any clearance agreement. Yeah, so I'll put a period after that and then transition over to your new experience working with Charta. I'd love to hear just a quick bullet points on that, like how that's been, how you feel like that this solution has helped you. And then once you're done with that, I can transition to the demo.
Yeah, I feel like I'm one of the perfect people to have like beta tested this thing because, I'm one half very cerebral, very studious, and very much like a consumer, and I help manage and I help just wear a lot of different hats. But I'm also like half a complete idiot and half a creative. And I just want to reinforce this. No matter how smart an artist is, there's the 10% of people above me who just run laps around my mind. I re-educate myself every single time I send an agreement out. Like I go through the dummy proof. Okay, Tate, like, all right, let's break this down into the composition. Let's break this down into the master. Like, remember, you are the label. Remember that. I slap myself, and I go through these processes of really understanding this whole ecosystem. I run through an example of just a simple number. I go through the entire assembly line, and I was never able to even envision what that was before going through this beta run. So like just in general, I think having a platform instead of an email to my attorney, I'm on a platform and every single step of the way, there's a little educational pop-up. There's a little cue of what I'm supposed to know. And there's a little cue of these hot points. And I was able to knock out 6 songs. Some of them had up to 5 collaborators. And, this wasn't close to the time that we had made the music. I was like, overall a month, but each one, it was only because 1 or 2 weren't even acknowledged. Like these were 10-minute ordeals. Any questions we were able to work through and answer. And there was just something so empowering about the respectability of me being behind that, whether it was a blunder of me accidentally giving a producer 100% of the song and having to explain that we had to go through this whole thing again, or vice versa. Or, it was just a really powerful process that we've been in this for 10 years as friends and collaborators, making music seriously. And this is the first time a lot of these guys have learned how an actual clearance agreement works, what they're giving up, what their rights were by default, the fact that the emails we had been using for 9 years had a lot of vulnerabilities in how much weight they held. And I don't know, it was just really, really cool because I wouldn't say it gamified it, but it condensed it into a timeline I could see. And the more I was able to reverse engineer that, I felt so empowered, like legitimately. It's so nice knowing I just was doing housekeeping and consolidating all the contracts for that and putting an Excel sheet and knowing that there's green lights under the hood. And how long it took before, I don't know. It's just everything. It's everything I've been hoping for. I know it's going to continue to evolve. I know the education is going to continue to evolve, but it's something that I've been waiting for. And I'm excited to see what types of careers this can birth for much younger artists who don't even have to think within the confines that we did coming into this industry. So that's like the overall feel and experience. I was working on mostly a beta model. I was helping with that experience, helping reduce the screens. So I just kind of almost finished my first agreement on there today for a song. And I just wanted to make sure we weren't bringing in one more party to, give a last back end. But oh my God, it's beautiful. It's even better. It's even more informative. And I think it also is great because as an independent artist, even clicking the label mode and educating yourself on what the industry standards are there, it starts to give you this foreboding understanding of what you'd be giving up in those partnerships. And I think there's just such an empowerment in this particular part of a process that was so opaque for me and a lot of us. And because of that, we were totally comfortable giving up and paying a premium for something we weren't quite understanding. So in general, that's long story long, but I still have a friend who is working as an attorney in another country and not living here on music because of a $5 million placement or, production that should be credited to him. But because of the world he was in at that time, it didn't happen that way. So overall, I'm geeked on this. I really, really am. And it's come along.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. And just to highlight that last point you made, one of the most important reasons why you need to get a clearance agreement in writing and signed by both parties is not just for the artist to make sure they have all the rights. As a producer or collaborator, you want to have the obligation for you to get paid in black and white, for sure. With that, I'm going to launch right into the product demo. So here we go. So as Tate alluded to, he helped us with our beta version. We released our beta version on October 17th of last year. It was open until January 31st of this year. In that period, we only offered one contract type, a producer agreement. We had 7,000 users sign up. We had 4,000 producer contracts completed, which was amazing. From November until the end of January, we were working on version 2. We were incorporating a lot of feedback, a lot of user feedback that we were getting. And then on February 22nd of this year, we released our first paid version, which is what you're looking at right now. Internally, we call it V2. So here's V2. We're very, very excited about it. What we're trying to build with this version, and we're very close, we just have a work for hire agreement and a pub split agreement to release, is a complete toolkit for musicians to clear all the rights in their music. So on the master side of things, we have a producer agreement, feature artist agreement, mixer agreement, mastering agreement, and we're releasing a work for hire agreement today. And then on the composition side of things, we're going to be releasing a pub split agreement. I think we're probably going to offer that as a loss leader, as a free contract, just to get people familiar with the process, because like I said earlier, typically pub splits are handled over email, which is totally kosher. With all that said, I'd love to run you through the product. So right now you're looking at the dashboard. This is a very simple but very effective project management tool. This shows you all of your actions that you need to take on top, whether it's creating a new contract offer, negotiating terms, creating your counter offer, or once you've agreed on all the terms, signing the final contract. In here, we have your sent offers, which summarizes all the terms that are being negotiated, which is amazing. I can't tell you the number of times I've had a manager email me when I was a lawyer and ask, whose plate is this agreement on and what terms are we still negotiating? And now you have that right at your fingertips. And I'll show you that in a bit. And then under completed contracts, we store the signed contracts for you forever with a plain English summary on top. So you don't need to go back through your email, dig up a PDF, try to read through the legalese, or worse, hit up your lawyer with a simple question and get a bill back for $250 for answering that question. So the way the process works is that each user is going to create their own offer by going through a questionnaire. there are pretty much 95% of those questions will be shared. So what we can do once we have those two complete sets of answers is compare them, show you where you have two different answers for one question, which means that's a term you don't agree on yet. We put you into the dashboard, into a negotiation experience where you can negotiate directly with one another. And the idea there is that you're working together to come up with one set of terms, one set of answers that you both agree to. That's the gold standard of contract negotiation. And you're doing all that in a metadata format. And as soon as you have that one set of metadata locked in, then we as a platform are ready to assemble a custom law firm quality contract for both users to sign. And so that's where we're very, very different from a template. We're not filling in the blanks in a rigid one-size-fits-all document. We can accommodate anywhere from 700 to 800 unique scenarios just for a producer agreement. So we are launching the music industry. That leverages my network. It also leverages the network of our advisors, which include Tim Smith, who manages Zed, Matt Colon, who manages Steve Aoki. So right now we're starting off with music. That being said, all the other verticals in the creator economy also rely on monetizing copyright and also rely on having one person or one rights holder that monetize that copyright, whether it's art, photo, video, TV, film. A studio needs to end up owning 100% of the rights in that feature film or TV show, et cetera. But for now, we're in music. So here are the agreement types that are available. We're releasing the prior agreement today. We'll go ahead and select a producer agreement just to keep it simple. Once you select your agreement type, we're going to ask you what your role is. Like I said earlier, 95% of the questions are identical across these two questionnaires. The questions that are different are more biographical. What's your mailing address as the artist? We're not going to ask the producer to supply that. Vice versa, we're not going to ask the artist to tell us what the producer credit should be. So those minor questions differentiate these two questionnaires. However, most of the questions are shared. So here we go. So one of the great things about this new version is that our previous version had a lot of screens that you had to click through. So we would give you information, you'd have to click continue, then you would answer a question. And the overwhelming feedback we got from our users was that they wanted to have questions first and information to opt into. So here, if like Tate, you were confused about what to put, if you have your own record label, what you could do is click on that tooltip, and then we'll bring in the information for you from the side. So you can read through this, educate yourself quickly, and then keep going through the questionnaire. One of the most important things about our platform is that we want a really good language market fit. And what that means is we want to put all the information that the artist or producer or other user needs to digest into a format that's clear and concise, not patronizing, is helpful, confidence inspiring. And so we just get right to the point. We don't talk down to anybody. We give you the exact information you need in a way that you can understand it, and then keep you going. And the other great thing about our platform is that we have a lot of conditionality built in. What that means is we can scale up or down to meet your needs for the contract. So if you're releasing through a distributor, you're gonna be asked what the distributor's name is, record label, what the label's name is. And you'll see once I click next that there are a lot of conditional questions that get generated if you have a label. So you see the new section popped up. We'll get there in a sec. And then we just run through this. Very simple questions. Is your producer done working on the demo or on the master, excuse me? Are you going to give them credit? Yes or no? If yes, how long do they have to send you marketing materials? And then a lot of the conversation in the hip hop industry right now is around non-exclusive beats. So we ask you, do you want the exclusive right to use your producer's contributions? You can say yes or no. If you do want exclusivity, you can choose how long that exclusivity lasts, all the way up to life of copyright. And then we get into the actual producer deal. So we start with the compensation that the producer is going to receive for working on the master sound recording. So we start with fee. What's great about this is you can get this insight right away by clicking on the link. This is exactly what I would have told one of my clients if they had asked me, what should I pay this person for a cash fee? What I'm really excited about is as we do more and more of these agreements and we build out our data lake, what we can do is start running predictive analytics that tell users on a percentage basis their chances of success when they offer up a certain cash fee. So I'm really excited to see that happen. We're not there yet, but it's coming soon. And then same thing, if you're going to pay some backend, we always ask for PBD and royalty, or excuse me, profit split. That way, if an artist who is upstreamed to a label, then we already know what the PBD is going to be. We don't have to have any issues around that. There have been multiple situations where an artist is upstreamed and the label says the producer is supposed to get 25% of all net, and we can't agree to that because that's more than your royalty. So having this in place makes your songs more marketable if you choose to go with the label. Then we get into the advance. Again, we have tooltips everywhere through this process that tells you kind of what standard, gives you a bit of market insights. That way you're not left without resources and you can answer any of these questions. You know, we talk about producer splits, what's the standard PBD royalty. All this information is there at your fingertips if you need it. If you don't need it, you can just keep going right through the questions. And one of the big things that I like to focus on is keeping the conversation around master compensation and pub splits separate. And so here we've gone through the fee and backend for working on the master, and now we're into the pub split, and we're asking the artist in this instance, will the producer be a co-owner of the composition? Are they a co-writer? If you don't know what that means, you can click on that. We tell you exactly who counts as a co-writer. If you don't want them to receive any cut of the publishing money, even if they did help co-write it, you can still select no here. If you say yes, then you can go ahead and put in a pub split. And this section highlights how expandable our product is. If you were an independent artist working with an independent producer, cash deal, you wouldn't see that many questions. If you're a label artist working with a major record producer, you're going to see a couple more questions that are more tailored to your situation. So for example, if Tate were to select royalties, knowing that I as a producer am getting some backend, we're actually going to touch on so-called record one royalties. Does the producer get a royalty on all sales or only on sales after recoupment? We talk about why that matters. Again, very helpful information that's put in a way that artists and producers can understand. We even touch on controlled comp clauses. I mean, this is some really high level stuff. I've demoed this for entertainment lawyers, and they always have a notepad out when I start demoing, and they write down questions. And at the end, they're like, I can't believe it. You've actually asked every single thing that I would have asked, which makes me very proud because it usually takes anywhere from 1.5 to 2 minutes for a brand new user to get through this questionnaire. So that's an incredible statistic that we're very proud of. And now we're into more of the, I would call it the administrative side of things. You know, after we sign the agreement, how long does the artist have to pay me my cash fee? When are profit splits going to get paid out? When does the label pay out royalties? Just helping to set expectations between the parties about when payments are going to be made. And to touch on what I was talking about, touch back on what I was talking about with Tate earlier, when you set clear expectations through the negotiation process, it really helps relationships after you sign contracts. People hate surprises. They don't like to know that you're doing something that they didn't know you could do, or that you're doing something that you weren't supposed to do. So here for the loan out company, again, this is how we adjust and expand to meet the needs of very advanced artists. If you do have a loan out company, you can go ahead and put your information in. If you don't, you can click no. And then finally, we get into disputes. So you get to choose where lawsuits are filed. This dictates choice of law. And then we get into so-called prevailing party fees. So if the two parties sue each other, does the losing party have to pay for everyone's legal fees? And then this is something I'm very, very proud of. This is the indemnification question. Indemnification is a big, scary word that lawyers like to throw around. It's very simple. If I get sued because of something you did, you should reimburse me for all of my losses. In the context of a producer deal, the only way an artist is going to get sued because of something the producer did is if that producer uses an uncleared sample. And so instead of giving you the full white label, or excuse me, full white paper on what indemnification is, we just put it directly into context and say, hey, if you as the artist get sued because of an uncleared sample that the producer used, do you want the producer to reimburse you for your expenses? You're going to say yes. And then vice versa, the producer could get dragged into a lawsuit over a sample that they didn't put in the song. And if that happens, they may want the artist to reimburse them for their legal expenses for defending that lawsuit. Once you click next, the other party gets an email letting them know that they have an offer waiting for them. As soon as they click on the link in the email, they get put into the other questionnaire. So once I clicked on that link in my email, I would go right into the producer questionnaire. I would fill out all those questions. And then once I click submit, we have those two sets of answers that we can now compare. And here's the negotiation experience. I love this so much. It's all on one page. We default just to show you the terms that you're negotiating. So it's a very effective to-do list. We show you the last two offers on the table for each term. And then we give you the ability to make counteroffers or accept offers right here in the dashboard. You can see the full history if you'd like. And this is what replaces redlining. This is a really, really good replacement for redlining. Too often, as a lawyer, I've had to go through markups and try to reorient myself in a contract before I can even start making edits. It takes anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how extensive those edits were. And then I can actually start responding. In this environment, we can go back and forth in a language that we both understand without having to worry about stylistic differences or anything like that. So once you've gone through and you've made counteroffers or accepted offers on every term that's still being negotiated, you can click this button. You'll submit to the other side your new response, and then they get their turn to go through it. The idea is you're working together to create one set of answers you both agree to. As soon as that happens, all the terms are approved. We show you all the final terms. If you wanted to see the negotiation history for a negotiated term, you could do that. But everything here is green check marked. You're good to go. You can take one last look. And as soon as you click view contract, that's when the platform activates. This would have cost you $3,000 or $4,000 if you had used me in my previous role. Now you're going to get it for a lot less than that. We're currently selling this agreement for $30. And what I love about this process is that we put data forward and legalese last. We put plain English forward and legalese last. And when you see this agreement, you see legalese for the first time, you're ready for it. You know every single term that should be in this agreement. So as you go through, you can see a lot of familiar terms. So you're like, I wanted a 5% PBD. There it is. 10% profit split. There it is. All right, where's my credit? Okay, there it is. Great. And then you can click on a button up here that says sign. You click that, you select your stylized signature, and then we apply it to the signature block for you down here. And then we store this signed contract for you forever in the completed contract section over here. And if you ever have a question about what's in the agreement, you can just click review, go into the contract summary. Let's say you want to know what we have to pay the mixer on a PPD. You get the answer right there. You don't have to go through that PDF in your inbox if you can even find it, or hit up your lawyer to ask them what it says. And that's the whole process. And what I love about this process, and I'll pause after this for questions, is because it's so data forward and we use the final set of metadata that those users have curated for us to generate the contract. Once the contract is signed, we can start sharing this data upstream with partners, with labels, with distributors, with publishers, to helping them get the data they need in order to effectively account to their artists and their co-writers, or excuse me, their published writers. So I think as we move, as we pretty much are in an exclusively digital environment when it comes to consumption of music, having all the data that's in a contract available in a format that's ready to use is just going to help artists get paid faster and drive more transparency in the industry. So with that, I will put a period at the end of that sentence and take any questions that you guys have.
I was just wondering, in the model, I didn't see a full album producer line or collaborator line. I'm guessing that's probably in there, right? Because in certain corners of the industry, a producer might actually work for a full album and want to just do a blanket deal for the whole thing without having to go song by song by song. Is that coming? That's one question. I have another question. Are you you might be able to tell the direction I'm coming from. Are you looking at any models for not-for-profit organizations or smaller arts organizations, or more niche markets rather than the huge commercial markets? If you can't touch all that, no problem, but I'm just thrilled, and this is a really cool thing, and I will be looking into it. I'll take my answer off the air.
Great. Yeah. Great questions. We have received a lot of feedback about that sort of, multi-song, one album producer deal that is in the product roadmap. We do want to build that out. We're not there yet. One of the things we're working on right now is actually getting our enterprise division up and running. And so what we can do is we can work directly with a management company to set up a custom solution that includes producer agreements that can cover a whole album. What's available on market today, you do have to go producer by producer and song by song. However, at the price point we're at, we think that that's fair. That being said, your feedback is well received, as is the other people's feedback that we've received on the same point. And we do have that in the product roadmap to have the option to say, this is for a whole album. I think what we would do though is say that for the whole album, the same terms apply across every single song, just to make sure that we minimize the complexity. We want to make sure that we're not overloading individual users that are just using our product coming from the internet. To the extent that something is really complicated and bespoke and custom, we prefer to work directly with an enterprise to set up that custom solution. And then for nonprofits, I guess if I could ask you a follow-up question, what did you have in mind?
Not-for-profits. So basically looking for world music, jazz, classical, collaborative artists, folks who do work out in the field, not commercial. Not sort of large commercial, more arts boutique type stuff. A classical producer will have a deal for the full album, period. And they would expect every piece, song, whatever would be included in the agreement. They just do a blanket agreement for the whole thing. When I work as a producer, that's how I work. But I'm also aware right now, lots of folks that I work with don't have these agreements in place. Oh, we've just hired an engineer. Cool. And I think that a lot of these markets can certainly learn from that. With regard to the not-for-profit, a lot of the artists on the other end of the producing deals actually are represented by not-for-profit entities. So those sides of the industry might well benefit from this. And I know so many smaller artists or more boutique artists who get stuck with deals in hand. They terrible deals that make no sense. They have to go spend, the $2,500 to even get a foot in the door to have someone say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Their records fall out the window, and it's just really, really sad. So maybe not. I'm not even talking about a discount deal for not-for-profits. It's more about just the smaller players are really lost in this really big field, and they could really use a leg up. And it seems like you're in the process, so I'm just excited. So I just want to, go team for what you're doing, and the smaller fish are very keen to see some opportunities coming their way too from this great work you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we want to be as expansive as possible. I think we're still a relatively young company, but we're always looking for feedback just like that. So I appreciate you putting that on our radar.
Cool, thanks.
Hi, thanks, Zach and Sharon and Tate. This is so fantastic to get this distilled. But I have 3 questions. I'll make them quick. The first is there a licensing fee for the software, or is it per agreement? Sorry if I missed that. And 2, once the attorneys are going back and forth on red lines, is there a charge for the number of revisions, or is it already contained in the original price? And 3, is there like a support if, we just can't get through understanding what's there, even though I understand you've simplified it, but some things get kind of nuts. Is there a support feature? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer the last question first because it's the easiest. You can always contact support@getcharta.com. It's me and my co-founder. We'll get back to you as quickly as we can. And then for the pricing model, so it's $30 per contract. Only the person that completes the first questionnaire and invites the other user onto the platform to negotiate that agreement has to pay that fee. It's like DocuSign, where if you receive an envelope or an offer, it's free for you to go ahead and join Charta. All you have to do is create a password, no credit card required. Then you answer your own questionnaire. You can complete the rest of the process. And I think that process leads me directly into your next question, which is what happens if a lawyer wants to redline. Under our individual offering, lawyers can't crack out the document from the platform. We only ever generate a platform at the very, very end. And so the 2 users are negotiating back and forth in plain English the whole time. No red lines are allowed. They're not possible. And then once you get to the very end, if you generated that contract and one person's lawyer was like, hey, I don't like this agreement for whatever reason, even though it's highly vetted, been shown to a lot of entertainment lawyers who are close friends of mine. They're like, I just don't like this language. The great part about using Charta is that you have the world's most complete deal memo. So you have every single possible term already agreed to, and that lawyer who wants to save the day and write everything in their own way, they can use that deal memo to draft the document the way they want to draft it. That saves you a lot of turns. There shouldn't be any red lines required at that point. That lawyer should be able to provide an execution draft to everyone to sign. So that's my answer to that question. I realize I gave you a half answer to the first question. If you wanted to sign up for more contracts at a cheaper rate, you could also subscribe at either $50 or $60 a month, which gives you 2 or 3 contract sends a month where you can initiate a contract. You can also do an annual subscription that gives you 24 or 36 contract sends upfront. And there's a deeper discount if you do it that way.
Sorry, we also have a question from Sebastian Charest. As a non-American songwriter or artist or label, do you encourage to use Charter or some legal stuff in the contracts that will apply under the US law?
Yeah, I love this question because the great thing about Charta is that we can scale across user types. We can go from individual artists all the way up to record labels with our custom solutions. And we can also scale across languages and countries. So we can translate the entire process into a different language. So for Latin American artists or French artists, you could go through the questionnaire all in your own language, negotiate everything in a platform that has your native language, and then sign a contract at the end of the process that has the provisions in both your native language and English. That's something that's on our roadmap. We're already working on Latin America. That being said, currently we're only US law. So if you wanted to enter into an agreement using Charta, that agreement will be governed by US law. We have a lot of copyright treaties here in the United States with the EU, specifically the Berne Convention, which covers copyrights that are created in America. It makes them protectable overseas in the EU. So you could theoretically use Charta as like a supranational contract that's enforceable in the UK, in the EU. Right now, we don't offer EU-specific law contracts or UK-specific law contracts. I will tell you that UK is probably one of the first ones we're going to do. Probably UK, Canada are right up there at the top of the list, but that's my answer to that.
Got it. Any other questions? Oh, thank you, Rolf. Rolf is keen to see an expansion to scoring agreements for stage and screen, but you now know to move into that if you're not already.
That's something we're probably going to go directly to the studios who offer up those contracts. So we're very careful when we think about a contract we want to automate. We think about who is going to actually send the first draft of that contract. For clearance agreements in America, because the labels don't help with them, it is the artist or their team sending over that contract to their collaborator. For scoring agreements, it's typically a film or TV studio who's directly hiring someone, or potentially a third-party studio that's going to provide that work. So with those agreements, for example, we go directly to Hans Blick's company and try to work with them.
Got it. Any other questions out there? Zach or Tate, do you have anything else that you? Oh, Barry Bergman. Why did it take 7 months to get his agreements together? What the heck happened there?
Oh, these agreements just aren't high priority. I mean, Tate is a dear friend of mine. He was at my wedding. I love Tate so much, and I would move him to the top of my stack for sure. And I would get out these agreements as quickly as I could, usually in a week or less. And then the other side would just sit on the draft for 4 to 6 weeks. And if you multiply that by 3 or 4 rounds of negotiation or redlining, you can see how it very quickly spirals out of control. And then the worst part is that I would be able to tell Tate after maybe 4 or 5 months, hey, we're totally done. Everything's good. We're ready to sign. And then it would take another 4 to 6 weeks to get the signatures. And we couldn't go to the label with the signed copy of the agreement until we had both signatures. Tate, you can chime in here.
We also had one particular producer who was riding off of 2 insane credits, one of which had quadrupled in his stake in a huge song after a legal dispute. So the leverage from one of the producers on a very negligible song actually ended up pushing the marker back the most, just from ego and needing a higher retainer as opposed to just trying to yield in the back end from his likeness. So just certain elements, there were manifold ways that it extended itself, but yeah. Crazy.
And I wish I could say that Tate was the outlier in a strange way, because we could at least be like, you had bad luck, it happened to you, I wish it didn't. But I saw that across every level of the industry, whether it was Steve Aoki or another big dance artist or another big pop artist. It takes a long time. These agreements just aren't prioritized, but they're very necessary, and they're a massive pain point.
Is there anything else that you want to share with our community? Because I know we're a little over, but I also don't want to cut you short. So
any managers of smaller artists or self-managed artists, for so long we were paying retainers or fees that we couldn't afford, that there was no sustainability with outsourcing that. So I recommend everybody to just sign up for it. It's like paying the cheapest retainer ever at the highest tier you can afford and just letting credits accrue. I always say that the creative process is one of experience and then composition, and there's a constant balance of marketing the music and creating it. So sometimes you'll have 6 months of no creation, no agreements, and all promo, and then all of a sudden you need to send out 6 to 10. It's nice to have those credits accrue. It's nice to have those sitting there, and it's just not a headache at all. So that was just one recommendation I made to all my friends, and they've definitely appreciated that so far.
Yeah. And one thing, and I don't want to have too much time on this, one thing I do want to highlight is that our process isn't tied to a particular contract or a particular user type. We can create custom solutions for record labels to help them with their contracts with publishers, distributors, etc. So if you or anyone might be interested in having a solution that's going to help them get contracts out faster, get them done quicker, we'd love to have those conversations as well as we continue to help individuals like Tate. This
has been great. I'm seeing a lot of wonderful feedback in the chat. So thank you so much. So I know when we were talking about this with various people were like, well, this is templates, right? I was like, no. I love that you showed me the demo and we could actually articulate beyond that, because the fact that you have all the points to learn and links off was great to be able to just clarify a lot of things. So thank you for creating the service and giving people an option to get things done. So just want to end here just by thanking Zach and Tate for sharing, their knowledge, their experience, all of these things that led them to this point, and to Zach for founding this. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to be here. And thanks to everybody who attended. We really appreciate you being part of this. And, remember, we're going to edit it, make it look pretty, and put it up on a YouTube site. So it will be there for you to use and share, and just to get the word out that this exists for people as a solution. And remember, please subscribe to our newsletter, our social media platforms. We want to work with as many people as possible to help one another and take an all ships rise approach to our music industry and community at large. So thank you again to everybody. We're going to wrap this up for now, and we look forward to catching up with you all in person at some point soon. Worst case scenario in a webinar. So thank you and have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everyone.